Hey, everybody, welcome to the first show of the Leadership Council. I am your host, Ellis Stone. And I have a special guest, someone that I hold near and dear to my heart, my sister from another mister, Nikki Ivey. How you doing?
Yes, I could you just like introduce me at every show that I go
Right,
on?
right, right.
That
Exactly,
was
exactly.
fun.
Yes, ma'am.
At least as happy to be here as you are to have me, right? If you're listening to this show, you already know that Ellis is dope. I've known this for a long time. I've
Yes, ma'am.
considered you the industry's best kept secret.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
happy to see this happening and happy to be here with you.
Awesome, awesome. So, Nikki, you have a lot of things going on with you. Yeah, the CRO at Inclusive, which is awesome. You was just named Salesforce's one of Salesforce's salespeople to follow. That's amazing. So, how's everything going? And how are you handling all the stuff coming at you?
You know what? The first thing that I had to deal with, and this goes back to um it goes like LinkedIn Top Voice made me feel
Yeah.
this way. This is actually the second year that I got to get to be was named as part of this Salesforce Sales Cloud
Hold on, wait.
thing.
Before you start, you gotta brush your shoulder a little bit. You gotta brag a little bit. Second year. But anyway, keep
I
going.
was trying to make it not sound like a flag, but okay.
Yeah.
No, but so that stuff has been happening, and the biggest hurdle was
Mhm.
overcoming imposter syndrome, right? You and I
Yes.
are great friends. You know this about me, and it was just like, that I had just allowed myself to get over it when it came to the CRO stuff, right? Will the other folks who have C-suite titles take me seriously? Will they genuinely embrace me as their contemporary? And then I got to a point where I was like, so like it doesn't matter
Right.
if you
So,
do or don't. Like
exactly.
I need to see myself that way, and I do. I've considered myself a leader for a very long time, long before I held any leadership title.
Hmm.
And as we were discussing offline, sure, there's a lot I have to learn.
Yeah.
Sure, right? If you're looking at me on paper in black and white, I skipped some steps. But what I would like for people to read into that,
Exactly.
what I've had to become good at helping people read into that is, well, think about this, right? You're talking about this person
Hmm.
who, compared to her peers, right? If my peers, let's say my peers were AEs or SDR managers, people are in those roles for years, right? And they're good roles to have. And I wanted those. Can I tell you that there was a point in time not so long ago I couldn't get hired as a BDR manager?
Oh, I
Okay.
remember. Yeah.
So what you're seeing is resilience
Yep.
when you see these what some would call steps skipped, right? What you're seeing is creativity in circumventing a system, and a sister got to practice that her whole life. So like,
Absolutely.
mad at me.
Absolutely. So, Nikki, I got to ask you a question. How do because I struggle with this as well. How do you effectively lead people when you have imposter syndrome? When you're not sure about yourself, how do you still, carry that swagger and that confidence that it takes to actually lead people effectively? How do you do that in the midst of having imposter syndrome?
Well, for me, like the other side of imposter syndrome, right? The part that's been like me constantly asking myself the question of whether or not I belong. The other
Hmm.
side of that is I tend to believe in, right, other people a lot,
Yes, you do.
right? Like I I recognize these qualities in folks that make it really easy, of course you're among these folks, make it really easy for me to root for other people, right? That is to say, sometimes I find it easier to see greatness or coach greatness out of other people, than I have found it for myself. But to the point, that's the little nugget inside of your question there, right? It is something that in order for me to be as effective a leader as I can be, I do have to be intentional about, silencing that voice that's telling me I'm an imposter, right? Because people can tell when you are unsure of yourself and you don't, I may have had it more than most, but people can tell when you're unsure of yourself. And then when you're in the case of like leading people, they need to feel like you are sure of yourself, you know what you're doing, you're, as certain as one could be about their ability to succeed. So, it's like, and you have kids, so
Yeah,
maybe you've
exactly.
experienced this, but where you have like say your first baby and they're just kind of chilling, maybe they don't learn to walk as quick, or maybe they're a little bit spoiled, and then when the second baby comes around, you start to see the older baby in there attending to and taking care of and trying to be an example for the youngest one. that kid is realizing how much they actually do know.
Yes.
That kid is realizing their own capability. And I think being a leader, even within this imposter syndrome, even within a lack of experience, when you're around folks who are, just junior to you, right? It challenges you to stop pretending you don't know things,
Yeah,
or stop trying to
exactly.
convince yourself you don't know things. And you're like, oh, I do know, because you have to know, right? So that's really what it's been for me, is really letting other people's who trust me with their own success, letting that be the thing that snaps me out of this idea that I can't or I won't or I shouldn't belong.
Yeah, and on the flip side, right, there's a happy balance, but I think as a leader, for me, you also have to be vulnerable, right? You also have to admit those times where you don't know everything, right? You have to show
Mhm.
the people that you lead that, okay, it's okay to be human. So it's hard to balance like being that confident leader with swag and also showing them the side that, hey, it's okay not to know everything. So how have you been able to balance that? Because I know from personally talking to you, personally knowing you, you're 100% willing to be vulnerable. When you don't know something or something's bothering you, you're going to say it. So how do you balance that?
That's a really, really good question. Part of the answer is that, it depends on that individual in the
Hmm.
moment that I'm leading, right? I think, certain individuals are comfortable with, certain levels of vulnerability from a leader,
Yep.
and certain folks aren't, right? There are folks who, and I fall into this category that I'm going to talk about here. There are folks who need that vulnerability from a leader to feel psychologically safe in getting the job done. So part of it is just, understanding who I'm talking to,
Yeah.
and, I am very intentional about setting the example that vulnerability is welcome, or right, or safe. So part of what I guess pushes me or makes me feel comfortable being vulnerable is the fact that I know that as a leader, people need to see that in me, or else I won't be able to get them to be vulnerable. And so I want to be clear here. A lot of the time when people or leaders talk about being vulnerable, I think people get this picture in their head of like a salesperson and a manager like holding hands and sobbing together. And that's like not what I mean, right? It's
Yeah.
like you said, right? The vulnerability is this ability to admit that, hey, maybe I had this wrong when I first thought about it. And if you want to have coachable reps, these need to be people who can admit that to themselves,
Yep.
right? I thought that this messaging in this email was going to be compelling. I've sent about 100 folks. I'm getting like a 0.3% reply rate.
Yeah, it's
Maybe I
that.
rethink that. But if you're not able to be vulnerable or just be like, no, it ain't nothing with me. These customers just don't get it. We've all heard things like that. Maybe I've said that a couple times back in my,
Yeah.
my early days,
Back in your heyday,
but
yeah.
that's what it is. And you know what? I won't say I test for this, but I look for it
Hmm.
when I'm evaluating salespeople. Like if I'm interviewing someone, most people get it. But I'll tell you a quick story. Um, I was interviewing, it's back when I worked in car sales,
Yep.
and I was interviewing this gentleman, and I asked him, it's a pretty standard sales interview question, at least it was back then, right? Which is, I just asked him to talk about, hey, what happens when you hit a slump, right? First of all, how do you deal with that? It's important that you are in touch with how you cope with adversity as a salesperson.
100%. 100%.
So I just asked him, right? I was like, how do you deal with that? And then how do you, like in a practical way, right? What are the steps you take to get out of it? And when I tell you, that man looked me in my face and said, oh, I don't have slumps.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I've never missed quota. And I'm like, my guy, even if that's true, you sound stupid, right? Even if that's true,
Yeah.
then you're demonstrating like poor strategy, poor emotional intelligence to say that to me out loud,
Yeah, that
right?
would scare me as a leader. That would definitely scare me as a leader. I wouldn't want him on my team.
So, so yeah, so that is so yes, vulnerability is important. I try to lead it by example so folks feel safe, and I try to identify it by asking that kind of question.
Yeah, and one thing that always compelled me about you is you always seem willing and ready to help people. Even me when I need a confidence boost. And you're always willing to speak up on things when things are not right. Like if something's not right in the industry, even if it could potentially cost you a job or opportunity, you're always willing to speak out on that. So I want to ask you, like, where does that come from? Like, was it something that you was hoping to have when you was up and coming, like that type of leader, or is it just natural for you that you always have to be the defender?
I was kind of born this way. No, I think that, listen, can I talk about it? Like,
Yeah,
here's
yeah.
the
Talk
thing.
about it. Talk about it.
Here's the thing. The department, I believe it was the Department of Homeland Security, Department of Defense,
Yep.
did this study a few years, not a few years, it was about in 2014, I think.
Hmm.
They were trying to figure out why suicide rates among Black women were, they still are the lowest, right, in the country among the major demographics, right? Because by contrast, right, white males have the highest. And so
Yep.
they were trying to figure out with respect to veterans who were coming back and having a really tough time. They were like, here we have this population of people, of women who have every reason, if you look around you, to be at that breaking point, right? There are no privileges that protect us from the types of things that, trigger depression and things like that. So the question then was like, how are they surviving?
Yep.
How are they, overcoming? And the answer that they came up with when they studied and spoke with these Black women was community. There was a sense of connectedness to the whole that sustains us as a people.
Yep.
And in particular, Black women have been the torch bearers of this. So that's part of it, right? It's just a culture that I have grown up in that says, roll up your sleeves and whatnot. But the more, I think, specific part that I took away from that study is this idea that Black women tend to view our lives and experiences within a historical context.
Okay.
That means that we are conscious in the front of our mind of how the things that we do today impact what happens in the future. You see this in our employment habits, the rate at which we're graduating college now and becoming entrepreneurs. Frankly, you see it in the way that we vote. But you see us showing up in that way. And it's because, yes, I am aware of, the impact that it can have for me to be quiet.
Yeah.
But I'll talk really quick about the catalyst for that. And then I promise I'll let you get to your next
No,
question.
no, no. I love to hear you talk, Nikki. Keep talking. Keep talking.
She talks a lot. But so what I saw happening is right before everything happened with the pandemic and this sort of cultural awakening, right, among some folks. It happened at a time when in the industry, right, I was beginning to build a brand where people associated like a level of I don't know, warmth or of, what a sweetheart type thing, right? Common mistake. No. So that was part of the brand. And with that came this pressure
Yep.
to always be positive, right? And always be projecting, a smile and, it's okay. We can all get through this together. And then, stuff went left.
Yep. Fast.
In America
Fast,
with
yeah.
respect to race. And I understood that if I'm experiencing things like, I've just watched something tragic and brutal happen to someone in my community.
Yeah.
And then I go to work and then I get asked, how was your weekend? Rather chipperly, right? That experience in and of itself, like it didn't break me, but
Yeah.
it draws your attention to the fact that the way that these events are happening, right, they're not impacting people in an equitable way. And so it is painful. It's a bigger burden to carry. And like I said, so I'm seeing that I'm carrying this. If I be quiet and just keep sitting up here smiling on LinkedIn,
Yeah.
then am I asking other people, other Black people who may be feeling this to do the same? Is that what is required of us? Is that what has been required of us? And do I want to be part and party to that? No. So I felt like I didn't have a choice.
Yep.
And I wrote this post and I just told the truth. I was like, I don't have the sunshine for you today. I don't have it. Ain't no mo. You know what I'm saying? Like,
It's
I
gone.
don't have the sunshine. I
Yeah.
don't have eloquence for you. I have rage for what is happening in this country. And I think for a lot of people that felt like, not that they needed my permission, but that felt like encouragement, that this person who, was pretty beloved in the sales community at that time, is, as you would say, to some degree of risk,
Yeah.
calling
100%.
these things out. And then once that sort of started, and I'm getting these inbox floods of new Black salespeople telling me, right? Like, I wanted to join this industry. My company was all, I was the only, and I felt like I had to, stuff all of that. Thank you for demonstrating that I didn't. So I guess that's the story of how we get to this place where I'm, an unwitting activist within this
Hey, I tell
community.
you what, anytime you post something, I run to it because I know I'm going to get value of it. And I think,
Likewise.
that becomes that's part of leadership. Leadership's not just about the title or something that you do professionally. When you're a leader no matter what. And leaders have to make hard decisions, and sometimes those decisions can be at the detriment of their careers and their opportunities. But real leaders don't think about themselves. They think about others and the people that they're leading and the people that they can help. That leads me to the other question. What values do you carry to help you be a great leader?
Ooh, this is good. These are just like some of the best questions I've been asked on a podcast. Shout out to Ellis, y'all. I don't mean to sound surprised. This is delight you're hearing in my voice.
Exactly, exactly.
So what are the values? I think, first and foremost, empathy, right?
Big one.
This ability, not even just the ability to, right? But
Yep.
an understanding of the impact of paying attention to what other people's experiences are and caring. If in a salesperson, if I can't identify that capacity, I don't know that it's going to work, right? Because I think that, I identify as an empath. My kids make fun of me for it, but whatever. So, so
My
it's
too,
true
too.
that
Trust me.
in a way that I can't really help,
Yeah.
and for better or for worse, y'all, gift and a curse. I tend to deeply feel what other people are feeling. And while, especially during a time that I just described for you a moment ago, while that can be extremely draining, it can be exhausting, it's something I have to stay out ahead of from a self-care perspective, it's kind of a superpower as a salesperson.
100%.
It makes it difficult for people to lie to you and get
Hmm.
away with it, right? So because, like, right, if I can sense what people are feeling, then I can, I don't know, sense if they're really excited and passionate about what I've just told them or just brushing me off. So anyway, empathy. Empathy is one of the values. The other is accountability.
That's a
And
big
this
one.
is not, yeah, yeah. I think when I started my career, I was really hard on myself, but through the lens of whatever leader or manager. That is, I looked for that accountability to come from them, right? So they're telling me, Nikki, you were supposed to make this amount of phone calls and you didn't. You are in trouble. And that was the mechanism, right, through which I was held accountable. And then, but that only works, right, if you have an engaged leader who cares to hold you accountable or someone who's skillful at doing that. And if that's not the case, if that's not available, you've seen it, right? There are these tisk tisk. There are these. I've seen these teams. So like, let's say it's a BDR team, and say your
Yeah.
name is Shmicky. But so like you're on a BDR team, and the manager is gone that day, right? And then what happens? Activity dips. Not every time,
It
right?
drops dramatically when the
It
manager's not there. Yep.
drops. And that's what I saw in myself. I was like, why am I not performing unless this person is here harping on me? Because I don't even like the person to be harping on me. So when I talk about accountability as a value, I mean accountability to one's self.
Hmm.
Because for me, it wasn't until I had like a terrible quarter, I was on a PIP, and yeah, it was about my pride was on the line. For many people, maybe that's not the case, right?
Yeah.
For many people, maybe it's more about, oh, I'll lose this job, I'll lose the income, maybe I'll be, embarrassed to tell my mom I started this job 3 months ago, and now I'm looking for a new one. Shout out to Sales Life. But
Yeah.
how it hit me.
Yeah,
No, but
exactly.
but yes, that was the sort of epiphany for me. So I was like, all right, what are we gonna do? And I just started like telling on myself to myself. That is, I would document the time that I came in the morning. I would document how many pieces of activity I had done by a certain part of the day. No judgment, just neutrally writing it down at a given time of the day. And then at the end of the day, I would look at my outcomes, right? And be like, all right, today I booked this many meetings. This amount of the meetings that I had previously booked have been, accepted by the AE as opportunities. And wouldn't you know it, on the days when I didn't have those outcomes that I wanted, I could tie it directly to things that I hadn't been holding myself accountable for. So when I can identify in a salesperson that innate, right, desire to hold themselves accountable and meet their own standards, I get excited about that. So I'll give you, I guess, three. So we have empathy, accountability, and I would say, the third one is, passion. And people maybe don't think about passion as a value, but I just don't know if anyone can be as successful as they possibly could be if they can't muster up some measure of passion. It doesn't have to actually be for sales. It doesn't even have to actually be for what
Has to be
selling,
your
right?
why.
Exactly. See, I know you know. But that's what it is, right? And so a way that I look for that in a conversation when I'm interviewing somebody is to ask them, like, what moves you? What do you get excited about? And it's okay if the answer doesn't have anything to do with sales or doesn't have anything to do with what they are selling. One time I asked the gentleman this question, and I had noticed before that he was sitting in front of this bookshelf, but I hadn't noticed what kinds of books were on it. And when I asked him that question, he let me know that they were like cookbooks, and Anthony Bourdain is his hero. And he was like, I am passionate about food and cooking and all this, which really didn't have much to do with what we were selling. But just when I saw that spark, right? That, yeah, I'm going to do something about this thing, that desire. That's what I wanted. That's okay, I can help this person be successful. And then though, there are folks, when I ask that question, doesn't make them bad people. Doesn't even mean that they wouldn't be successful in another sales team. But for me, if I ask a person that question and they struggle to find something that they're passionate about, I don't know. I don't know if I can help them, or because people, I'm telling you, that's an answer I get sometimes. What moves me? What am I passionate about?
Money.
I don't know. I really, I just be, it's
So,
like,
so, Nikki, this is another question then. Do you build your team around your values? Like everyone that's on your team, do they have to share the same values with you? Or are you okay having a mix and match of different people with different values? Or is it just easier as a leader to just have everyone kind of on the same page?
I love that question. And you know what? I don't know that I have like a definitive answer. My instinct is this: I know better
Okay.
than to think that I know better.
Love
So
it. Love
I
it.
understand these three values are what's important to me. They're what have made me
Hmm.
successful. But uh, that's not the only thing that can make people successful, right? Like,
Yeah,
you
exactly.
know, how I just feel like it's super douchey to be like, you got to be like me and do what I do in order to, get these results. Now, having said that, the way that we balance that out, which meaning allowing for values that aren't necessarily the same as mine, but the way that we balance that out and make sure that we are getting a group of folks who can get on one accord, for one big goal, because that is, I mean, sales is a team sport, is I just pay attention to the fact that sales is an art and a science. So I associate these values that I've talked about for me as part of the art, right? That is the all things being equal, what's going to win out. And what is going to win out is passion, empathy, right? And that accountability. But there's something to be said for someone who has nailed the science. I have met myself many an introvert, okay? Like deep introverts. I'm talking about drive in the car and don't even play no music introvert. I can't relate, but
Wow.
these people exist. And,
Yeah, exactly.
and you know what? They're some of the best salespeople I've ever worked with. So
100%.
maybe you don't get hype like I get hype about these other things, but when you have accomplished something that you set out to accomplish, that's what you're moved by. So I try and leave room, right, for both. I try not to engender sameness on my team, because people or philosophies or cultures that have, leaned on sameness, right, this whole culture fit thing, those have had a negative impact on my career. So I try as best as I can to, attract and support folks from as many different, backgrounds and, personality types, as possible. So again, if you care about the science part of this at all, and you got something in you, you know what I'm saying?
Just something. Nikki
That
can
can
bring
get
the
it
rest out.
done.
Nikki can bring the rest out.
Yeah, and you're coachable. I can probably work with you. We'll,
I,
we'll find what moves you. We'll get you excited about something.
so Nikki, one of your values, some leaders think should stay out of leadership, is empathy, right? Because one of the questions that people have, and one of the things that people struggle with, is how do you combine empathy with accountability, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of leaders struggle with that because it is a fine line. I can be empathetic that you're struggling, but you still need to show results. So how
Yep,
have
yep.
you, had the ability to show empathy but still hold people accountable?
I don't see the two as mutually exclusive. I understand what you're saying. I think a
Mm,
lot of us saw like the most blaring examples of this um, right at the beginning of like the pandemic and lockdown and stuff, right?
yeah.
Where people are saying we're in unprecedented times. Remember that?
Yeah.
We're in unprecedented times, and you can't just go in full force with a sales message. You have to show empathy.
Empathy. Yeah.
And a lot of folks interpreted that to mean, hey, Ellis, these are unprecedented times. I
Times.
hope you're doing well.
How many emails
And
did you get
that's,
like that?
oh, lots,
Yeah.
right? Because people thought that that's what empathy was. And like I was saying earlier, right? People do think it's like, let's hold hands, let's braid each other's hair, let's cry about high school boyfriends, let's do all of that together. And it's just not, right? So I have empathy for what it feels like to really want to accomplish something, to be in a position where you have to accomplish something
Okay.
or people don't eat.
Yeah, exactly.
Empathize with what it feels like to be in a position and not know what next step to take, not know what lever to pull. And then, by extension, then start to doubt yourself. So when I say empathy, when I feel empathy for a salesperson or a person that I'm leading, that's where I'm coming from. And because that's where it's coming from, right? Then wouldn't it follow that my steps that I would take to help that person would be steps to help them start believing in themselves again, steps to help them achieve these things that they want to achieve, and achieve it in a way, right, that they can extricate themselves from this position of constantly feeling like they have to achieve it. I mean, the amount of salespeople living that paycheck to paycheck life
Yeah.
cannot be overstated.
100%.
Cannot be overstated. And so again, when I encounter people who are in that position and don't see a way out, my empathy for them shows up as coaching. It shows up as holding them accountable. Because again, when that coaching piece and all of that comes from a, dictatorship or a dashboard, management type thing, or stuff rolling downhill because investors are saying this, or the board is saying this to the VP of sales. The VP of sales is saying these things to the BDR manager. And so it's rolling. And that's why I have to hold you accountable. It's empty. It's
Yep.
empty, and we'll all lose. So I guess that is how I reconcile them. I let the empathy part fuel the leadership part and what happens next.
That's a great answer, and I think that's the most complete way you can go about it. Holding people accountable is a source of empathy because you hold them accountable, you can bring out their greatest self, and if you bring out the greatest self, things get easier for them. So that's absolutely right. So I got a question for
I
you.
see that in you so much, Ellis. I
Thank
see
you.
that the way you talk about your team. Y'all, I'm gonna just go ahead and say it, Ellis. Okay, you're getting your flowers. So, um, there is a person who was on Ellis's team who reached out to me to tell me how wonderful Ellis is as a leader. Like the phrase "life changing" was mentioned, and when you talk to me about how you lead your team and um, how you center their goals around what they're trying to accomplish in their lives and their why, you're doing what I just talked about, and
Thank you.
you're teaching people that. And I don't know, just want to stop and make that known.
Coming from you, it means everything. Trust me, it does. Nikki is, one of the people, and this is why I wanted her on my show. Is she motivates me? Like even if I'm down, like, and I talk to her, I'm like, I can do everything, and that's part of being a good leader. Uh, Nikki, this is a question that I want to ask you. Do you think it's better to lead with uh, a position of respect or a position of fear? Because I've been led both ways. Right? Some leaders that they just want to be fair, so you do what you're supposed to do. And me, I like to lead out of respect, right? I like my team to respect me, and if I feel like if they do, they'll go to war for me. So I kind of think I know the answer. But what do you what do you think about those type of leadership styles?
Well, look, I think that it's not like there's no reason why the folks that lean into, leading by fear do that. I mean, for a lot of people, it is producing results in the
Hmm.
short term. And in some cases, maybe it's producing better results in the short term than those folks who are coming from the place that you described. But that's only good when the circumstances are ideal. When the chips are down, ain't nobody gonna storm the beach with you
Nope.
if all you did was dictate to them, if all you did was endeavor to get them to fear you. By contrast, if they respect you, like they're running through a brick wall for you. So that part, I would put all of my eggs in that basket before, aside from the fact that it's just like I am uncomfortable with people fearing me.
Yeah, me too. Yeah,
Um,
it's weird.
like it scares me. Like you scared, I'm scared. What's happening?
Why are we
So
all
like,
scared? Yeah, exactly.
like what's going on?
Yeah,
You already know
yeah,
we
yeah.
run it, we run it.
Right,
But
exactly.
yeah, so that's the other piece of it, right? Is I'm uncomfortable. Like it's not that I'm uncomfortable telling people what to do. I don't love telling people what to do. But it's again, I have to go with where the results have come from, and I just haven't seen, in my experience, both on both sides of it, right? I haven't, as a person being led, I haven't had my best results from someone, leading with fear at all. And then it took very little for me to leave those organizations.
Quick.
And in a time that we're in right now, um, you just can't afford to give people a reason to leave, and insisting that they fear you, I think is a pretty good reason that you would have been giving someone to leave.
No, 100%. I've been led both ways, and I will pick the respect route 100% because the one that leads out of fear, I just want them gone. Like I don't want to work with them anymore, right? Because one, they're not trying to better you. They're not trying to grow you as a professional. They just want results and they just look at you as a number. When you lead out of respect, like you were saying, you have people that will run through walls for you, that will
Mm-hmm.
follow you from organization to organization if need be, and will not only do what they're supposed to do for them, but for you. And those would be the people that when you do take a day off, they're like, let's go and get these numbers for our manager, right? Because
Yes.
he or she is not here and we have to hold it down. So I definitely agree with you. You know, managing out of respect is 100% the way to go. So me and you, we see eye to eye. So, you know, what are some hard lessons you had to learn in leadership? And I know it can be painful because I've had to learn a few. So,
You saw my face.
yeah. So, what are some hard lessons that you know you've had to learn and things that you have endured to become the lead that you are now?
Shoot. Well, I talked about the first one, which was, not holding myself accountable. I'll drill down into that a little bit more as far as
Hmm.
what it really looked like. And I guess the thematic thing that I learned is that if it's always somebody else's fault, it's probably your fault.
Yeah, 100%.
And so I
100%.
was giving my poor BDR manager the toughest time because like I didn't realize I was doing a thing to him, but it's like pulling his hair out. He's like, here's this person. I know she's talented. I know she can do these things, but I can't get her to make dials to save her life. So, and then my response was always something, right? It was
Yeah,
always, none have the right territory, or what do I have to call as much because I can get these, all this
yeah,
nonsense. And remember that time I told you I was in a slump and on a pip?
yeah, yeah,
Got me there was again not taking this accountability. And again, you want to talk about the impact of sales failure or not achieving your goals in a sales career on your personal life. I have 4 children, right? So being on a PIP is a particularly terrifying experience.
100%.
And so that was part of the lesson, right? Like I never want to have to feel like this again, right? Of course, we all like nothing is ever whatever, right? Perfect. But that was what sort of opened my eyes to this fact that if I was going to succeed, it was going to have to be as much on my own steam as possible. Because otherwise, I am leaving not just my career in someone else's hands, I am leaving, my kids access to meals on time, right? My ability to put my son in soccer, right? I'm
Yep.
leaving that up to what this manager because I didn't have the right territory. No ma'am, no ma'am, you better find it. So that was the lesson there. I think the other one that I really try to help other people with is not putting leaders, even my favorite ones, on too high a pedestal.
That was a big one for me as well. Definitely.
Yeah, I made heroes out of human beings. And, some of them were maybe worthy, most of them were probably not. And this is not a knock on those individuals. It's just that's a fact of life, right? If I had spent so much time seeing every person with a leadership or C-suite title as so many rungs ahead of me, so to speak, right? Then I would always think that I wasn't going to be able to catch up,
Yep.
right? Or I would think that I even needed to catch up. And none of that is true. Also, like, I have to talk about it, right? At the end of the day, because sales has this lack of diversity, a lot of these heroes of mine were going to be white men.
Yep.
The world engages with Black women in a very different way than it engages with white men. So in a real way, I can't do it the way that they did it.
Nope.
So it doesn't make very much sense for me to try and map out my path, according to what these leaders have done because they're my heroes, and try and speak like them and present myself like them and all of this when like that's never going to work. I'm never going to be them. There's a CeeLo Green line. It goes, I am not like them at all, and I cannot pretend. The song's called Fly Away. You can YouTube if you want, but it go.
Yeah,
But anyway,
exactly.
so yeah, so that was the real like the big one, and that's the one I think that I'm still sort of riding the wave of right now, is letting myself get excited about what it looks like for me to lead as myself, right? As Shaniqua Chantel, okay? As Anna Pearl's grandbaby. What does that person look like? that person doesn't show up like a Chad. I'm sorry.
No,
Like
it
I'm
doesn't.
not going to, I don't show up like these other things. And that was difficult before. And maybe I fought that before, but it's working for me now. And it's liberating me now.
That's hard though. When you first become a leader, to lead as yourself, that is one of the most difficult things, because like you said, you have these people that you look up to, and in your mind is like the way to get to that spot is to be them. But then you find out the more you try to be them, the slower it takes you to get to that level, right? So ultimately, the thing that's uncomfortable, which is being yourself, is the thing that works. But I think it
Hmm.
takes a lot of people a long time to get there because it's scary. Because you're like, will they accept me in this space as I am? Because I remember the first time I started going to like high level meetings, and I'm thinking I don't have any value in these meetings until I heard them, and this is no shade, speak, and I'm like, oh, okay. I'm on their level or past the level in terms of my
Yeah, yeah,
capabilities. So I think it takes you to put yourself in uncomfortable positions, uh, to be comfortable with being yourself. So bravo to
yeah,
you,
yeah.
for figuring that out, because a lot of people don't know, right? In reality, you're really still kind of young in your leadership, like your professional leadership
Yeah,
role.
for sure.
So I think you found that out uh really early, and that's probably why, like we talked offline, people might look at your resume and see that you skip steps, but no, there's a lot of work that happened in the background. And I'm gonna give you a little props too. Me and Nikki has worked on things together, and we've been on meetings together, and we talked about it. Some people might treat her differently because she's a woman of color and she's has these opinions, but Nikki never let that get get her off her game. Even though we can clearly see that they're approaching her differently, um, she was still
Can I tell
professional.
you
Yes.
one of the things that was the probably the first thing where I actually was consciously hearing or understanding this idea, right? Is, and many of you maybe have heard this or saw this, but Michelle Obama, I forget who was interviewing her. She was asked about, um, what it's like when, you're the only and you have this seat at the table, and what can women do to get a seat at the table? She very frankly goes, I've been at that table and they're really not that smart. And I was just
Exactly.
like, I'd never considered
Exactly.
that the table doesn't have to actually be like the smart table, right? It could just be the table of people, who had the better opportunities or who were better at finding those opportunities. Some of them are going to be obviously
Smart.
smart,
Yeah.
but the point being that people are successful for different reasons. And if being the top of the leaderboard, perennial president's club is the thing that moves you through your career, I'm extremely happy for you, right? But there are people who make up, I don't know, the other 80% of your sales team, who also can have successful, viable sales careers or marketing careers, or whatever kinds of careers that they want within a business or a SaaS organization, that again, where their success is not going to come from the same place as yours, and it doesn't have to, because how boring would that be?
Yeah. If everyone at the table is the same, I don't want to be part of that table, right? Because you're not gonna learn anything. You're not gonna grow because they're definitely all the same. Nikki, I'm.
Also, we out here building more tables,
Oh
just so
yeah,
you
we
know.
building our own table, exactly. Shout out sales for the culture. You gotta do that. I'm gonna get a little personal with you. And mental health. Right? We've discussed mental health offline and other instances. So, how do you balance taking care of your mental health while leading people? Because when you lead people, there's a lot of pressure. There's a
Mhm.
lot of pressure. And again, like we talked about, kind of have to have this swag about you. And that pressure can take a toll on your mental health. So what are some things that you do to make sure you're okay mentally?
I used to really not even look at the time off policy because I
Mm.
was like, I ain't taking no time off. Salespeople don't get time off. What you
Exactly.
mean? There's too few selling days in a month for me to spare one on the beach. So that was where I was coming from, and very quickly, right? one burns oneself out. And so, I mean, and it was bad.
Yeah.
Like literally pushed myself to the, it's back when I was selling cars, pushed myself to the point where I collapsed.
That's tough.
I was maybe for like the third day in a row, had maybe gotten 2, 3 hours of sleep the night before. And it wasn't just, the job or the money I was trying to make that I was prioritizing because I am this empath. If someone so I worked with this woman on a Monday, right? She had needed some time to come up with the down payment for this car. She comes up with it. Wednesday, this is exactly what happened in this scenario. Wednesday was my off day. She came up to the dealership on my off day. The way that it works there is if you're not there to actually close the person, no matter how much work you've done with them, you don't get credit for the sale, and I needed it.
Tough, yeah.
So I, again, on this day off, when I was going to get to be there to spend time with my kids after school, all of these things, I went back up to that dealership. And what I really wanted was for that woman to get the same level of consideration and service that I knew that had been giving her, and not just some other salesperson coming in there so they could get the commission. So all these things, right, that amount to me putting myself on the bottom in favor of other people. It didn't work out. Okay. It did not work out. It was like a worst nightmare type situation.
Yeah.
And so I had to start taking better care of myself. Right. And so for me, I just have to be, again, intentional about taking the time off, pay attention to how much I'm, sleeping, and I know these things sound simple, but some of them are even more difficult in remote work. Right.
You feel like you're always at work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So yeah, so those are the things that made it really, really difficult for me. The other piece of that, though, I mean, as ever, is that, I know that people, for whatever reason, sometimes look to me for inspiration.
Yes.
For support, for motivation. And when I can manage when I'm getting those messages and when I'm engaging with that, it's fine. But say I'm at an event, in-person event where there's a lot of people who may be acquainted with me online and haven't met me in person, I feel a pressure to be for them what they think I am based on what they see. I would say that's probably the hardest part when you get any kind of visibility. Right? Not just in the very famous world of B2B tech sellers. Listen, I have no delusion. Not famous. But
in that circle of
in that circle, you have to protect your own not identity, but your own, those parts of you that belong to just you.
Mm-hmm.
And I have had to, I don't know, forgive myself, for lack of a better term, for not always being on, for not, being this sunshine. Because Ellis, when I'm not, or there are times when I haven't been, and I can see disappointment in people's faces.
Yeah, that's tough. Yeah.
I thought she was inspirational. She's just over here talking about Britney Spears. And so it's not quite that bad. But yes, suffice it to say, pay attention to what your body is telling you.
Yeah.
Because at a certain point, your body's going to stop telling you, and it's just going to do. And you don't even want to know what that feels like.
I've been there. I've been there.
And then value yourself, right? Maybe you don't feel like you're not valuing yourself, but look at how when you negotiate someone else's discomfort or someone else's needs in the moment, who do you act in favor of all of the time or most of the time? And if there isn't a balance in that, you're in trouble, right? Yeah. It's a matter of time before you become too exhausted to sustain any measure of success. So these are forefront of the mind type things for me, in order to stay sane and successful at the same damn time.
That's awesome. Nikki, I'm asking you one more question. I'm gonna let you go. If you had to give a young leader one bit of advice, what would it be?
Ooh. I'm trying to decide, do I go practical here? Or do I go emotional? Um, I think I'll go practicals. I think it's
Okay,
probably
yeah,
more helpful. One of the best things that you can do as a new leader is get really good at internal selling. That is, build as, you know, strong a relationship as possible with internal stakeholders who will have some kind of an impact on, your outcomes, on what you're able to achieve. And it's going to show up in really like simple ways. Like I'm making it sound like it's all grand, but practically, I'm a BDR manager. I come into a team and there's a piece of, you've been there with me, Ellis, and there's a
yes,
piece of software that I need, right? I know we need Sales Navigator at minimum, right, to be
hmm
able to get XYZ done. But I am new to leadership, so maybe I don't quite know how to make my, either the CEO or whoever it is that's going to approve this as a budget item, if I'm appealing to them emotionally, right? Or I want them, I'm basing this on how much they like me, or I'm just expecting that they understand, on its face why this is important the same way that I do, the same way that many other sales leaders do, then I will lose. So you have to assume nothing. You have to sell whatever that tool is that you need, or whatever that headcount is that you need, whatever it is, to sell it like you would be selling to a prospect. Straight, like dead ass. I have to learn how to sell Sales Navigator to my CEO. It is what it is,
exactly,
right? Because if I can't, it's not like I lose, I'm wrong, I don't get what I want. Now my team is out here struggling doing manual stuff because I couldn't figure out how to have these conversations right now. Give yourself some grace. There's a learning curve, right? You might get shut down many times
many times, exactly.
before you get to this point where you've figured this out, but it will be worth it because that's a skill set you're building that right now is applying to maybe a founder slash CEO, but as you move forward it'll be applying to investors that you meet with. It'll be applying to a board, I'm saying, for all these other purposes, all these other big sort of business transactions and things that happen. So you got to summon some courage,
Yes,
and you have to let what your team needs drive you, and get in there and fight for them, for whatever it is that they need.
awesome, Nikki. Nikki, thank you so much for being my first guest. Let's cheer for Nikki. Let's cheer for Nikki.
Thanks for having me. This was so
Awesome.
fun.
Yeah, so Nikki, thank you. Come again. Keep being a rock star. Keep being amazing. Yeah, thank you.
Back at you.